Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
One of the really rewarding aspects of my life these days is that I am being besieged by people who have questions and a fascination with Winston Churchill. Many of them have sort of just discovered Winston Churchill in the popular movie Darkest Hour, which I think is a fine movie. It's got its flaws, but it's a fine movie, and I'm frankly happy for people to fall in love with Winston Churchill however they want to. But I wanted to sort of spend this podcast talking a little bit about Churchill lore, about some of the books, some of the films that I think are valuable when it comes to Winston Churchill, and generally encouraging you to fall in love with Winston Churchill. People are growing in fascination with him, partially because of our own political times and the lack of Churchills on the national scene. People are discovering him because he wasn't emphasized in their schools and in their studies, or if he was emphasized, it might have been negatively. And people are learning to love him, learning to enjoy his perspective, finding his personality refreshing. And I got to tell you, I am thrilled for all of this newfound fascination with Winston Churchill. I first began reading about Churchill when I went to college in the 1970s. I had lived in Berlin and known British officers who knew Churchill. This would have been around 72, from about 72 to about 76. And I found the whole thing fascinating. When I went to college, I had a history professor who was fascinated with Churchill and had written on Churchill. And later I had the privilege of writing a book on Churchill as well. So I want to encourage you to invest in Winston Churchill. Learn about Winston Churchill. It is rewarding at every level. It's rewarding at a historical level. You'll just learn more history. And by the way, biography is a great way to access history and to learn history and to find it fascinating. It will be rewarding at a personal level. You'll find Churchill challenging to you. You'll find him with wisdom for your life. You'll find him an example of how to overcome difficulties that I think you'll find inspiring. And you'll just find the hours you spend at the feet of Winston Churchill in the presence of Winston Churchill to be magnificent and to be rewarding. So people are writing me, asking me which books I most recommend other than my own. If you're interested in mine, you can go on Amazon. Under my name, you'll find my book on Winston Churchill. It's out in several different versions, and I'll just leave you to that. My favorite book about Winston Churchill was written by Winston Churchill. I'm a big believer in going to original sources. I like reading the original stuff, the stuff the actors in history actually wrote or first-hand observers did. And so my favorite book by Winston Churchill, or about Winston Churchill, is called My Early Life. It deals with the first portion of Churchill's life through his childhood, through his early journalistic and military careers, up till about the time he ran for office. And I think you'll find it fascinating. You'll get a sense of his personality. You'll get a sense of his humor. You'll be moved by his rhetoric, by his skill. And I think you'll be moved by his life. You'll also be moved by the faith story that's there. His emphasis upon Elizabeth Everest, his nanny, who was profoundly influential in his life, particularly in the area of his faith, which is what I tend to emphasize in my book. So My Early Life, available in inexpensive versions, available in Kindle. I think you'll really, really enjoy that. If you're not going to read My Early Life, or if you want something beyond that, or you read it and you just think, I want more, there are some books that are very creative in the way they deal with Winston Churchill. One of my favorites is called 40 Ways to Look at Winston Churchill. It's written by a favorite young historian of mine whose name is Gretchen Rubin. Highly recommend that you get this book. What she does is she looks at Churchill from 40 different perspectives. It's as though she's turning the diamond of Churchill's life. She looks at him from the standpoint of his greatness, from the standpoint of his flaws, from the standpoints of what his critics said about him, from being a good father, being a bad father, being a good leader, being a negative leader. And she draws in the opinions of others so that you really feel like you've got a a full treatment of Churchill. You're not just looking at a hagiography. You're not just looking at a book of criticism of him. She obviously admires him, but she's sort of turning the diamond, turning the picture, looking at him from a variety of perspectives. She's also, by the way, written a book by the same title, except that it's about JFK. So 40 ways to look at John F. Kennedy. Gretchen Rubin. The book is 40 Ways to Look at Winston Churchill. Highly recommend it. By the way, I have no financial stake in any of these books except my own. The other book I really like that's more recent about Winston Churchill is called Hero of Empire, The Boer War, A Daring Escape, and the Making of Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill went down to involve himself in the Boer Wars in South Africa as a journalist, was captured and held by the Boers in a POW camp. He escaped, and the escape made him in the sense that it sort of solidified his manhood, caused him to face himself, caused him to face great danger, but it also made him in a PR sense. It made him a man of note in the Western world and led to the rest of his career. So fascinating book. And that book is by Candice Millard. Candice Millard, Millard. My favorite older book of Winston Churchill, written in the 50s, while he was still living by a man who knew him, is called Winston Churchill, An Informal Study of Greatness. This was a book that I read early in my life in studying Winston Churchill. Really admire this book. It's written by A.J.P. Those are initials. A period, J period, P period, Taylor, Taylor. Historian, British scholar, and I highly recommend this book. It's filled with anecdotes. Again, Taylor knew Churchill, and Churchill, by the way, is still in his heyday. He hasn't entered into his dotage, as they say. He hasn't declined. He's not the Churchill of the 60s, old age, appearing once in a while in a photograph, but not really public. He's still Prime Minister of England for the second time, and it's a pretty fascinating look, although it's a bit adoring, which I don't mind. And then finally, if you're looking for a very substantial study of Winston Churchill, I really like In Search of Churchill, Martin Gilbert. Martin Gilbert was the historian who took over from Randolph Churchill, Winston Churchill's son, the project of writing a multi-volume biography of Winston Churchill, and Martin Gilbert, an eminent scholar, a Jewish man, by the way, completed that series and wrote it beautifully. And so this is the one volume conclusion, so to speak, the one volume summary, the one volume that treats the whole of Churchill's life, In Search of Churchill. It's not a deeply scholarly biography. It's more Martin Gilbert reflecting upon what he's learned, what he's experienced, what he's seen, what some of the challenges are in trying to understand Churchill. But in order to understand Churchill, you don't just want to dive into books, you also want to dive into film. And my favorite film was made in the 1970s. And the reason I like it so much is not only is it brilliantly acted and filled with great stars, but they also draw directly from Churchill's biography, or autobiography, My Early Life. They use great big quotes from it. The events are almost straight from it. And so it's called Young Winston. Still available. I think it might even be on Netflix, but I might be wrong about that. Young Winston. I really love what HBO has done with some of its special series or special little productions. One's called Gathering Storm. One's called Into the Storm. And two different actors play Churchill, which makes it even more interesting. I don't know why they did that exactly, but it makes it fascinating because you get the different nuances of personality and two different actors struggling to sort of capture who Churchill is and how to present him. And also, I really like a slightly older presentation with Robert Hardy playing Winston Churchill, and it's called Churchill, The Wilderness Years. Churchill, The Wilderness Years. And I love the recent movie Dunkirk. Churchill is not quite as heroic. He's got to change his opinions. He's battling with Eisenhower. He's not quite presented in the same way he is in Darkest Hour, but highly recommend him. So, Young Winston, Darkest Hour, Gathering Storm by HBO, Into the Storm by HBO, recent movie Dunkirk, and then Churchill, The Wilderness Years, a little bit older presentation with Robert Hardy, famous actor, playing Winston Churchill. Again, the books, In Search of Churchill, Martin Gilbert, My Early Life, Winston Churchill, Hero of Empire by Candice Millard, 40 Ways to Look at Winston Churchill by Gretchen Rubin, and Winston Churchill, An Informal Study of Greatness by A.J.P. Taylor. And I want to urge you to do something. You may not be the kind of person who is interested in book clubs. You may not want to be part of one. And I because of my schedule and travels, I have a hard time being committed to something long-term like that. But if Churchill has really sort of awakened in your soul because you've seen Darkest Hour, or you've seen one of these other movies, or you're just catching sort of the buzz that's out there about Churchill, or just the fact that Gary Oldman's going to probably get the Oscar, just makes you fascinated in the movie and fascinating in knowing more. Let me suggest that you do a Churchill book club or a Churchill reading group just for a short period of time. Just take one of these books and invite 5 or 6 friends who are interested in Churchill to sit down and read them, or just do a movie club. I mean, I've just mentioned 5 movies. I think there are a few others that might be good. And so just who knows, 5 weeks or 10 weeks, 5 every other week, and let people read a little bit preparing for each movie. Have a little movie club. But let me encourage you, just for a season here, while this fascination in your soul lasts, dive in a little bit, learn a little bit. It's not just that I want you to know history, although the history of World War II and all the other history that Winston Churchill's life overlays, absolutely fascinating, absolutely essential. But also, if you want to be ennobled, if you want to lead better, if you want to be, I think, a better human being, and if you want to be entertained, because Churchill is eminently funny, eminently inspiring, eminently entertaining, invest yourself a little bit in Winston Churchill. And it doesn't have to be reading great big volumes. I think I've probably got 200 volumes of books on or about or from Winston Churchill. I'm not recommending that you get crazy like I have, but take a little time, watch some movies with some friends, make some fish and chips and have a gin and tonic, and, do a little bit of British cooking. Have some fun. And in fact, some of my British friends joke that when they watch British movies, they send out for Indian food. That's their favorite thing. Curry shops are hot in England, obviously. So have some fun. Read a book. Watch some films with some friends. Form a book club. Invest a little bit. I can't think of a more high-yield life to invest in than that of Winston Churchill.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.